If you really want to understand the US-Israel and Iran conflict, you have to look at the capabilities on each side, because behind the headlines and political statements, there's a real military balance shaping everything that happens next. So let's break down what each side actually has. Let me be concrete about the military dimensions, because a lot of the public conversation abstracts this into Iran has missiles versus America has carriers, without giving you a real sense of what the matchup looks like. The United States. The US has the most capable military in the history of the world. That is not flag-waving, it's a factual assessment of capability. Multiple carrier strike groups positioned near the Arabian Sea and the Strait of Hormuz. F-35s and other advanced strike aircraft operating from land bases across the region. Tomahawk cruise missiles that can hit targets from ships and submarines at ranges exceeding 1,000 miles. The most sophisticated intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance apparatus ever assembled. Air, land, and sea forces coordinated through command and control systems of extraordinary sophistication. Washington Post, reporting on February 28th, cited a Navy official describing more than a dozen U.S. warships supporting operations near the Strait of Hormuz and the Arabian Sea, including multiple carriers and destroyers. The U.S. also has something equally important: layered air and missile defense. CENTCOM said it defended against hundreds of Iranian drone and missile attacks with minimal damage. That reflects the effectiveness of systems like the Patriot, THAAD, and ship-based standard missile systems. Systems that have been refined over decades and that, in this conflict, appear to be performing well. Israel. Israel's contribution to this operation was substantial. Reuters reported Israeli pilots struck hundreds of targets simultaneously, reflecting a level of operational planning and coordination that required months of preparation, which is consistent with the reporting that the operation was planned in coordination with the U.S. months in advance. Israel's Air Force is one of the most capable in the world, equipped with F-35s, F-15, and F-16, modified to Israeli specifications. Its intelligence services, particularly Mossad, have a history of deep penetration of Iranian military and nuclear programs that gives Israeli planners a level of target knowledge that no other country could match from the outside. Israel is also now operating with a fully replenished munitions supply. The $675.7 million emergency arms sale documented in the Federal Register, those JDAM kits and 1,000-pound bomb bodies, gives Israel the precision strike capacity to sustain high-tempo operations against hardened targets. And the $500 million in missile defense cooperation in the FY 2026 defense bill ensures that Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow systems are funded, maintained, and integrated with American defensive architecture. Iran. Iran's military is a fundamentally different kind of force. It cannot match the US or Israel in conventional air power or in the technical sophistication of its weapons systems. But that is not the fight Iran is designed to win. Iran's strategic doctrine is based on deterrence through asymmetric threat. Its ballistic missile and drone arsenal, large, diverse, and geographically distributed, is designed to threaten the entire region and to impose costs on adversaries who might consider attacking. The IRGC's Gulf Naval Forces are designed to threaten shipping and to complicate U.S. naval operations in the confined waters of the Persian Gulf. Its proxy network, Hezbollah, Houthi remnants, Iraqi Shia militias, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, extends its reach into Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Gaza without requiring Iranian military forces to operate directly. This is the doctrine of someone who knows they cannot win a conventional war against the United States. So they've built something different. A web of capabilities and relationships that makes the cost of attacking Iran, the second, third, and fourth order consequences, potentially very high. The question that Operation Epic Fury is answering in real time is whether that deterrence was real or whether it was a bluff. And the honest answer is, we don't know yet. Hezbollah. The public capability estimates for Hezbollah vary significantly. Some current assessments put the rocket and missile arsenal at roughly 25,000, reflecting degradation from the 2024 conflict. Legacy estimates from before that conflict ran much higher, 130,000 in some figures, though the precision fraction of that arsenal was always heavily contested. What we know is this: Hezbollah has rockets that can reach Tel Aviv. It has precision-guided munitions in smaller numbers that can hit specific military targets with accuracy. And it has the operational experience, the command structure, and the ideological motivation to fight. Whether it has the political authorization from Iran's leadership, in whatever form that leadership takes after February 28th, to enter this conflict is the central unknown. What the Iranian people are experiencing. I want to pause the strategic analysis for a moment and do something that I think most of the coverage is failing to do. Talk about Iranians as people. Iran has approximately 90 million people. The majority of them were born after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. They did not choose the government they live under. A significant portion of them have been risking their lives over the past several years to protest that government. In 2019, in 2022, in the winter of 2025 to 2026. They have been shot at. They have been imprisoned. They have been tortured. They have buried their dead quietly because the government controls who can speak and who cannot. Many of those people, probably most of them, do not love the Islamic Republic. Many of them dream of a different kind of country, and now those same people are waking up to the news that the United States and Israel have launched the largest military campaign against their country in its modern history, that their cities are being struck, that their family members, some of whom are in the military, some of whom are simply in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time, are among the dead and wounded. Here is the tragic paradox at the heart of this operation. The stated goal includes freeing the Iranian people from an authoritarian government. But the instrument chosen, mass airstrikes on military infrastructure across a densely populated country, is not experienced by the Iranian people as liberation. It is experienced as invasion, as attack, as the thing that Iranians have been told is coming for decades by a government they may not trust on much else, but which at least got the threat assessment right. History tells us, again and again, that when a country is attacked from outside, populations rally around their government, even when they despise it. Serbian nationalism surged during NATO's bombing of Yugoslavia. Iraqi Sunnis, who had no love for Saddam Hussein, took up arms against the American occupation. Wounded national pride is one of the most powerful political forces in the world, and military operations that inflict civilian casualties activate it reliably. The Iranian students who were in the streets in December 2025, the young people whose protests were crushed by the IRGC, are now watching their country be bombed. Some of them will conclude that the protesters were right all along and that the regime is the enemy. But others, maybe many others, will feel something different. Will feel that the enemy is the one dropping the bombs. This is not a prediction, it is a pattern. And it is one that the architects of this operation either did not fully reckon with or reckoned with and accepted as an acceptable risk. The Strait of Hormuz, a story about your economy. Let me get very practical for a moment. The Strait of Hormuz is not an abstraction. It is not a geopolitical footnote. It is the reason the price of everything you buy, every plastic item, every piece of clothing made overseas, every gallon of gas, every electricity bill tied to natural gas generation, is about to get significantly more expensive. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves through the strait every day. Saudi Arabia exports through it. The UAE exports through it. Kuwait, Iraq, Qatar, all through Hormuz. The moment that passage becomes unreliable, not closed, just unreliable, the market reacts. We already know that shipping companies began suspending operations in the strait after the February 28th strikes. We know that navigation warnings went out from multiple governments. We know that the IRGC broadcast what Reuters described as radio warnings that no ships were allowed to pass, though Reuters also noted uncertainty about whether that constituted a formal or binding order. Oil markets will price in the risk. Insurance rates for vessels transiting the area will spike. Some shipments will be rerouted around Africa through the Suez Canal, adding weeks to delivery times and enormous costs. Others won't be rerouted because there's no economically viable alternative. The 2019 Houthi strikes on Saudi Aramco knocked out 5% of global oil supply temporarily and caused the biggest single-day oil price spike in history. What we're looking at now is potentially an indefinite, ongoing disruption in the most critical maritime corridor in the world. Not 5%, not temporary. If this disruption is sustained for weeks, the economic consequences begin to ripple outward in ways that go far beyond the gas pump. Food production requires energy. Fertilizer is derived from natural gas. Global shipping runs on oil. The supply chains that deliver everything from semiconductors to medicine to food are all, at some level, dependent on stable energy prices. This is why China is so alarmed. China imports approximately 40% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. A sustained disruption is an economic threat to China of the first order. And economic threats to China have a way of becoming strategic priorities very quickly. This is why European allies are alarmed. Their energy independence from Russia. The project of the last 3 years, undertaken at enormous cost after the Ukraine invasion, runs partly on Middle Eastern imports that move through Hormuz. This is why markets will be volatile. This is why the economic aftershocks of Operation Epic Fury may be felt by people in Ohio and Bavaria and Seoul who couldn't find Manab on a map. What happens if the regime falls? I want to engage seriously with the best-case scenario for the operation's architects, the scenario they are publicly and privately hoping for. What if the strikes work? What if they hit hard enough, fast enough, that the IRGC command structure fractures? What if Khamenei is killed or incapacitated? What if the combination of military shock and political chaos creates the opening that the 2025 protesters didn't have? A moment when the government's ability to respond is degraded enough that a popular uprising can succeed? The CIA, remember, was asked to assess this scenario. and it declined to predict a positive outcome with confidence. Here's why that matters. Iran's government is not a single person or a single institution. It is a system. A complex interlocking system of clerical authority, revolutionary guard control of the economy, intelligence services, and the formal elected institutions of the republic. Removing one element, even the supreme leader, does not automatically cause the system to collapse. It causes a succession crisis. And succession crises in nuclear-adjacent states with large, well-armed military forces are among the most dangerous moments in international relations. In a scenario where Khamenei is killed and the clerical establishment is in chaos, who controls the IRGC? Who controls the nuclear facilities? Who has authority to negotiate? Who can make credible commitments to stop the fighting? And what happens to the proxy forces? Hezbollah, the Iraqi militias, the Houthi remnants, who are now operating without clear direction from Tehran. The history of successful regime decapitation operations is not encouraging. Libya is a failed state. Iraq spent a decade in civil war. Even in cases where the immediate military objective was achieved cleanly, the aftermath proved to be the far harder problem. And Iran is not Libya or Iraq. It is a country of 90 million people with a sophisticated industrial base, a real military, a complex political culture, and a nuclear program that in a chaotic post-regime scenario could very quickly become the most dangerous proliferation event in history. I want to be clear, I am not saying the Islamic Republic of Iran is good or that preserving it is the right goal. I am saying that regime change is not a plan. It is an outcome. And the gap between the military operation and the desired outcome, the plan for the day after, the week after, the year after, is the gap where the most consequential decisions are made. And based on the public record, that gap has not been filled. The UN, theater and substance. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency session. Russia and China both backed the request for that meeting. Russia condemned the strikes sharply. China called for an immediate halt to military actions. And the United States, which holds a permanent veto on the Security Council, was not going to be bound by anything the Council passed. So why does the UN matter? Because it is the arena where the world's moral and political verdict gets registered, even when it can't be enforced. Because the countries that line up to condemn or defend or abstain, the global South nations that have watched with mounting concern as Western-led military interventions have repeatedly failed to produce the promised outcomes, are making calculations about their own relationships and their own security. The UN vote, whatever it produces, will tell us something about how isolated the United States and Israel are in their framing of this operation. In 2003, when the U.S. went into Iraq, it could not secure Security Council authorization and proceeded anyway. The coalition was smaller than advertised. The international legitimacy was contested from day one, and that contested legitimacy made every subsequent decision about how to govern, how to rebuild, how to exit harder. The pattern here rhymes, and the countries that abstain or quietly support the Russian and Chinese position are the countries that are recalculating their long-term relationship with American power. That recalculation has consequences that outlast any single military campaign. A final thought for Part 2. There are people who are going to watch what happened on February 28, 2026, and see it as justice, as the inevitable result of decades of Iranian aggression, proxy warfare, hostage-taking, sponsorship of terrorism, nuclear defiance. as the moment when the West finally stopped apologizing and acted. And there are people who are going to watch the same events and see something else. A sovereign country attacked on a contested legal basis. Civilian casualties in a school. The machinery of great power politics grinding over the people who had no say in any of it. Both of those responses contain something true. The world is not simple. Iran's government has done genuinely terrible things. The threats it poses are real and documented. The people making these decisions are not cartoon villains. They are people who believe, with varying degrees of sincerity and evidence, that they are preventing something worse. But the test of a decision is not the intention behind it. It's the outcome, and the outcome of Operation Epic Fury. What it actually produces for the people of Iran, for the people of Israel, for the soldiers and sailors and civilians and children who are living inside this story right now, that outcome is still being written. In Part 3, we go to the ground. We look at the human stories inside this conflict. The Iranian protesters who woke up to bombs, the Israeli families in shelters, the diplomats in Geneva who watched 6 months of work evaporate in a single night. And we look at the endgame, what a negotiated settlement might look like, what it would require, and whether anyone involved is actually capable of getting there. Stay with me.